This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke and Eddie Jones. Today, as exclusively revealed in yesterday's Australian newspaper by Jamie Pandaram, Ewen McKenzie will be joining us through this program and through the Lions series to give us his views on the rugby, his views on what is going to happen. And when you think about Ewen McKenzie and you think of your relationship, particularly with Ewen McKenzie going back, it's one of the great partnerships, isn't it? That you guys have worked together for so long, you know each other so well, and you've created so much success, particularly for Australian rugby back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, I think, I was lucky enough to play with him. I was at the end of my career. He was an intelligent, tough player. Yeah, we had a good period for Randwick, and then he went to the Brumbies, and I remember going down there at Christmas time and sharing a pre-match meal of sausage rolls with Link. I can still remember going to the Kensington Bakery. But he's coming to the end of his career, and I think through his introduction, I was able to get a start at the Brumbies, and then he came on as assistant coach, and a lot of the success was due to his intelligence around rugby. He was an outstanding assistant coach and obviously became a good head coach in his own right. And it's been a great loss, I think, to the rugby intellect in Australia that Link's no longer part of the sort of rugby fraternity, but I can understand why.
Well, he's back now and he will join us in a moment, but I can confirm that it was in fact Ewen McKenzie who had a lot to do with your appointment at the Brumbies, because my association with Ewen actually goes back to when I was a journalist, late 80s, early 90s. And I always used to love talking to Ewen because whenever you left talking to Ewen, you would feel like you were taught something, that you knew more about the game. And he was always so very engaging, always so very generous with his times. But I really got to know him when he came to the Brumbies. And I think it's a story that's not been very well told. But the success of the Brumbies, there's no person, other than Rod McQueen, there's no person, I don't think, other than Ewen McKenzie, who really had the greatest impact on the establishment of the Brumbies, because he was sort of the chief recruiter. And for a lot of those younger players, both in Queensland and in New South Wales, who came to Canberra, they came because of Ewen. They came because Ewen got on the phone and said, no, this is going to be a good thing. And he was able to bring them to Canberra, and he was able to be that experienced voice in the establishment of the team. But it wasn't only what he did around the rugby, it's what he did off the field as well. And I know in my role as an advisor to the team, around the marketing, around the communication, around the media, he always had a lot to offer. And that role that he played at the Brumbies, I don't think has ever been sufficiently acknowledged, but he was certainly a key foundation stone. And in terms of your appointment, I do remember very clearly, late 97, the Wallabies were in trouble. McQueen was appointed, and obviously, we at the Brumbies needed a new coach. And we were sort of the darlings of world rugby at that point in time, having gone from 5th place in our first year, 2nd place in our second year. And, excuse me, the boys used to gather for what they, a cappuccino set. John Connolly used to bag the Brumbies as the guys who sat around in the sun drinking coffee. And anyway, you could always find them down at the local coffee shops in Kingston. And on this particular day, I thought, Ewen will know. So anyway, I went down there and sure enough, I found him. And I said to him, just pulled up a seat next to him, and I said, so, who's it going to be? And he turned around and he said to me, Jones. And I thought, I did, but you weren't even on the radar. And I was thinking, Sydney club coaches, Queensland club coach, Jones, who's Jones? And he said, Eddie Jones. And I said, Eddie Jones? Eddie Jones, what's Eddie Jones doing? He said, well, he's just finished coaching a university team in Japan. And I remember saying to him, you can't be serious. And, in his way, he looked at me and he said, he's the right man. He's the right man for the job. And I remember thinking, because the players and certainly Ewan had a big say in what went on at the Brumbies. And he was right. He was absolutely right. And it went on to great success. But fantastic. And I'm so delighted that when I rang him a couple of weeks ago and said, time to come back, time to offer some of your views. And he has agreed to do that. So with that, I'd like to welcome Ewen McKenzie to Rugby Unity and get him straight to work. So, Ewan, as we look to this weekend, no Skelton, no Tupou, no Valentini, no Gleeson, no Parecki. Dare I say it for the Wallabies, no chance?
There's always a chance. The one thing about rugby is there's many ways you can approach the game, many ways you can play it. And, there's some physical presence that's not there available to be selected. But the challenge for a coach is always to find a way. And, I'm a big believer that there's the physical side of the game, there's the mental side of the game. And I think tactically, the thing that's always interested me and the things that we always did, Eddie and I used to talk after club football ad nauseum, is about how you play the game, the opportunities you've got to play each week. And you can change things each week. You can change how you defend. You can change how you can attack. You can change where you kick off. There's lots of things you can do differently to try and mentally challenge the game. And I think it's, for me, the Wallabies, regardless of who they picked, we're going to have to do something a little bit different to try and get some mental stress on the opposition and put them under a bit of pressure. If you just go out there and play in an orthodox manner, they've got a lot of good players. They've got a lot of great players coming off the bench, So it's a matter of being able to manage that side of it. So I always see opportunity in the game, and it's a question of what knowledge you can impart in a week, and what level of comprehension you can get amongst the playing group to be able to make a difference on the day. But there's always a way to win.
All right, so looking at the team that has been picked by Joe Schmidt, how would you expect that they are going to play tomorrow?
Well, I don't know. It's not how I would have picked the team, but I think that I don't think we'll see a lot different from what we've seen in the past. It looks to me to be reasonably orthodox. You've got, with Jake Gordon there, he can snipe and attack. He certainly is. He has that license in defence. He comes out of the line. He's quite good at reading one after. So there's individuals there. McWright's a really important player, I believe. But the balance of the team, there's some experience there, but it's a lightweight forward pack, I'd say. So I kind of hope that I would play with some sort of tempo. I think you've got to keep the pace of the game up. I don't think stop-start's going to cut it. You need to be able to keep the tempo of the game up and keep challenging them by doing subtle things differently and keep them under pressure. Don't allow them a chance to catch their breath, basically.
So tactically, though, when you say up-tempo, don't allow them to catch their breath, how do you actually apply that? What sort of things will we see the Wallabies do?
I've watched the games to date, and I haven't seen anyone throw a quick line out in. I've seen the Lions do it, but I haven't seen any of the opponents do it. Quick taps. There's lots of ways. You can keep the pressure on the referee. I mean, the whole discussion in rugby these days is about how much time's wasted at scrum time and line out. Yet the tempo of the game just is run at that pace. You can put the pressure on the referee. There's nothing stopping the referee saying, "Come on, let's get on with it. Let's get this scrum. Be first at the scrum, ready to go." And you've got to show a level of enthusiasm and put pressure on the referee too. Let's keep the tempo of the game up. Not allow people to stand around, catch their breath, and think. So if you can keep them under mental pressure, then things change a little bit,
So, Eddie Jones, your thoughts?
I think, I'd summarise it like Lincoln said. I reckon Australia's got to play like guerrilla warfare. They've got to be in and out of contests, be moving the ball quickly. Maybe the first 4 penalties you take quick taps. You've got to do something that's going to psychologically upset the Lions early, because if it just becomes a a settled game of rugby where you go from set piece to set piece, the power of the Lions is going to win the game. And as Ewan said, their bench will come on and they'll win the game pretty easily. It mightn't be a big score. They're not going to win by big scores, the Lions. They haven't got a lot of points in them, but they've got a lot of consistency about their set piece, a lot of consistency about the way they play the game. And that's the hallmarks of an Andy Farrell coach team, from his rugby league background. They talk about in rugby league the long game, just stay in the game, and they'll play like that. Whereas Australia's got to really risk the game, really try to break the game open, really, really go for it. And I think really good point Ewan made, you can put a lot of pressure on the referee because the referee now are absolutely petrified of being involved in the result of the game. Because of what Rassie Erasmus has done with referees, they're petrified of being a figure in the game that has an impact on the result of the game. So they want to be liked. They want to be so much liked. They try to take things out of the game where there's a contest. And Australia's actually got to bring them into the contest.
Ewan?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Guerrilla warfare is a really good way of putting it. There's a lot of things you can do from the kickoff. You don't have to kick off deep to the left or deep to the right that everyone does. You can kick it off somewhere else. There's different things you can do. You can stand all your players on one side of the field. Everyone spreads out. The receiving formations set. Everyone's got comfort. I'm watching the same formations every week. You can change. You can make them all stand on one side of the field. You've got to dictate. You've got to give them something different pictures to look at, and then try something. A little short kickoff, whatever. But you've got to try something so that it takes them in a different space. Then the next time you kick off, they have to cover the option you've just done, whatever it is, short kickoff or down the middle. Or they've got to cover that. So then they're going to move people. So then people get stressed because suddenly they've only got one lifter and not two, because everyone just kicks off to the same spot all the time. You get a box kick back, goes into touch, you have the line out. South Africa does it the best. They organise it that way. They get the line out. They'll drive the line out. They'll either get a penalty, kick a goal, or they'll pick and go towards the place and get a penalty that way. So you've got to be able to take the game out of just being orthodox, because they will win it 9 out of 10 times because of the volume of good players that they've got. It's always about who's coming off the bench, really. They're going to get the last 20 minutes, and they've got high-quality players. The only other issue they have, if you think about this at different levels, if you're a club coach, you have your players for the season, right? So you develop relationships, and it's the ups and downs week in, week out. When you become an international representative coach, you get the players a couple of weeks beforehand, and they're from different outfits, different team cultures, whatever. It's a different blending exercise. The Lions, as much as they have a lot of high-quality players, all of those players are used to getting picked every week. They're all starting players in their national teams, right? They're used to getting picked. This week is the first week where they've delineated who's starting, and then suddenly you've got the distraction of all the players who normally start and are normally heroes in their own country. They're not starting. So then you start to get, there's a possibility of, the behind the scenes, it all gets a bit more complicated because people get stressed that way. So you've got to be able to, and they've already had some injuries. So there's a bit there that works in Australia's favour. But I don't know how they're going to play. I'm not seeing a passing midfield. I'm not seeing the ball getting to the wings easily. But we talked before about changing the tactics. You don't have to kick from 10. You can stand your 10-1 out. You can pass to the wing and get the winger to kick. Make everyone and then kick it then. You can do different things to keep the tempo of the game up and to make everyone run more. Make them run more. The Australian team looks pretty fit. They're used to fairly up tempo. They're not a heavyweight pack. They've got good mobility in the tight five. So I think that there's opportunities there depending on how they play.
Eddie Jones?
Oh, just adding on to that for what Link's saying, Australia's had the unique situation where they've had the team for, 4 or 5 weeks, which is unusual for an international team to have that length of preparation. So, some of the things Ewan's talking about, one of the big things is getting the players to believe in it. And when they come from, a reasonably orthodox team, to ask them to do something different is sometimes difficult. But if you've got that preparation time, you're able to trial it at training, you're able to practice it at training. So I think that's one big advantage for Australia. And just again, on the back of what Link said, I think, South Africa are one of tactically the smartest teams in the world because they get everything back to trench warfare. Like they kick off, they don't kick the ball 10 metres because they want to start with a scrum. They create an illegal maul in general play. So they're doing almost the opposite of what Australia has to do against the Lions. Australia's got to take everything out of the game and try to make it little bits and pieces of game, whereas the South Africa, the stronger they get, the more they actually go to what they're good at, which I think is brilliant coaching from Erasmus, even though it's potentially illegal.
Mm. So in terms...
I think, Pemby,
go on.
Pemby, just the one area I see of difference, having watched the games, is the breakdown. And so that goes to the referee. First referee is a Kiwi. So he will be more suited to the Australian approach. In the Southern Hemisphere, the contest of the breakdown goes for longer. I've watched the Lions. They tend to contest the ball, but not as long. They concede possession and then they'll take the defensive line. So it's, the middle of playing rugby league. They don't contest the ball. The one guy who I thought was interesting was Jack Morgan. He was the guy who was actually spending time trying to stay on the ball. In other words, adopting a Southern Hemisphere approach. You get reward from that from a Kiwi ref. When I saw the referee and thought about it, and I know Eddie, we've done this before. We did it with the War-Smith combo. I would have thought Tizano and the right might have been an interesting combination with say Hooper as a back row. For me, that's a really interesting back row because there's lots of things, lots of pressure. If you get a little bit light of the breakdown, you've got guys that can contest hard the ball. You've still got line-out presence. I know that leaves the captain out, but I'm just looking at the way the thing's set up. Another way of testing the opposition is to have more presence in the breakdown. That's the one thing I think that the Southern Hemisphere teams, they spend a little bit more time, I'm talking about a second, at the breakdown contesting, and they'll get reward for that. They'll get reward, I think, in the first game. The referees are from different countries, and they look at other things like the gate and cleaning out beyond the ball and things like that. They're more focused on other things. The contest for the ball will be interesting in this first day. I thought there was an opportunity there maybe to have the two on-ballers in the back row to start. That would be one way of putting some pressure on the line straight up.
Eddie Jones?
Yeah, the breakdown's going to be definitely a key contest. Keith, I think, generally likes a quicker game. He wants to steer away from scrum contests, more contests. He likes the ball in and out. But I think Link's point about where could potentially Australia get a point of difference, it could be at the breakdown because the Lions are a big, heavy team, and so when they do move the ball, which Finn Russell likes to move the ball, like Finn Russell, particularly this is probably the biggest test he's ever going to play. First test, you've got to try to make him play as an individual. And to make him play as an individual, you've got to try to get him to shift the ball. So if they can make those first couple of rucks a real fight, that'll encourage him to move the ball away. Because a lot of what Ewan's saying is that you've got to make the Lions play as individuals. You've got to put enough pressure on them to make them play as individuals, because they are all stars in their own right. So if there is a problem in the game, they'll have the thinking that they want to solve it themselves, and that then creates an opportunity. And we've seen that with Lions teams. If you go back to 2001, what happened? Players wanted to solve it by themselves and games. Australia were dead in both, after the first half of the second and third test. They had the games won, didn't they?
Yeah.
But they were able to put enough pressure on them to make them play as individuals.
Yeah.
So, Ewan, how do you do that? How do you go about creating the pressure such that the, Finn Russell and others will play as individuals?
I think the Brumbies gave us a little bit of a preview. They made that game it was turgid. It was a little bit ugly at the breakdown, but it didn't have any rhythm. And they were in the game for some time, particularly that first half. They, for me, gave a pointer. They made a bit of a mess out of it. And so if you can be, and they're all, as a team, traditionally they're good. They're all good over the ball, even the wingers and whatever. If you can be genuine and be accurate at the breakdown in defence, they just have to commit more players there in attack. And they've got less. There's less of the la-di-da out the back, less options for Russell. There's just less options. So therefore, it just gets a little bit tighter. So then, as the pressure, if you can build the game over 20 minutes or whatever, then suddenly the players, the heroic players, they feel obliged to be able to do something. They're going to do something extraordinary, and that's where hopefully opportunity comes that way. But they kick a loose ball. You got to run it back at them. If you just kick it back to them, we're not challenging them, right? Because that's how they can deal with that. They play that every week, So if you think about it another way, you think about the average performance of every player. In the ideal world, you'd like to get what I call a budgeted performance. They'll statistically give you X number of tackles and whatever per game, and that's their budgeted performance. Australia's probably going to need a few guys to play above their average performance, to be able to get there. But that can happen, with the emotion of the moment and whatever, that can happen. We're going to need everything to go right, but you got to be prepared to take some risks there and do things a little bit differently. So, as Eddie said, they've had time to practice stuff, so I don't know what the mentality is, but they've had a bit of time. Normally you don't get much time. You get a week, maybe two, and then you've got to front up against the All Blacks or someone like that. It's tough, You try and put something together in a short space of time.
Eddie Jones, looking at that Australian team and taking a lead off what Ewan said there, who would you expect to be that player or players who have got enough in them to get to that 25, get to that 30-minute mark, and to be the ones who are putting the pressure on? When you look at the Australian team that's been selected, who should we expect or can take that leadership role?
Well, I think Gordon, as Ewan said, he's a pretty smart defensive player, and if he can get in that 3 or 4 out from the ruck and really put pressure on the second line plays where they go behind the Russell, and that'll generally come on the second or third phase of their possession. And if he can disrupt Russell in that area, then you break the chain. Because the other thing, just thinking about what Ewan was saying, if you look, the bulk of the team's Ireland and England, and they both have a very ordered way of how they play the game. The Irish are, they're a new incarnation of the Brumbies in the 2000s. They're very structured. They move from one part of the field to the other. And they like order in their game, and they like to know who's cleaning out. They like to know who's carrying. And the English are very, have that same mentality. They like to be organised. They like to know when they kick. So if you've got the bulk of the team who want order in the game, they want a nice controlled attack where they can play from A to B to C to D, and then see what they're going to do. If you can break that up and break the B up, which would be attacking Finn Russell, and then get McRae coming hard from the inside and get a couple of turnovers early, and then get a quick tap and play on top of them, and just let Australia, you've got Jorgensen, Potter to a degree, and Suiali, who are really good instinctive players. So if you can get the ball in their hand early from a turnover or from quick taps, then you've got a chance of upsetting the apple cart.
Ewan, how hard is it to sustain those types of disruptive efforts, and who would you look to lead that disruption?
Well, I think it's going to have to be the whole team. If I look at they've got guys who are naturally inclined. Like Fraser McRae's a really good player. Like he can play really well in defence. He can play really well in attack. He's got really good attacking instincts as well. So he gives a bit. I don't know about Nick, the back row. I'm not sure. I've seen him play, but he hasn't stood out to me, but he obviously has been picked for reasons. He's got a big physical presence. The second row's mobile. They can Williams and Frost. They can maintain intensity. As I said, the front row's same, but it's up to everyone really. I mean, I think it'll go back to the spine of the team. So Ali's got, Matt. He's got skill. So does Jorgensen. But it's a question how they get involved in the game. Potter's the same thing. He's got a bit of X factor about him in terms of making things happen. I think Liner will actually be quite good. At 10, I think he's quite an accomplished player. He's played in the UK environment. I think he'll be a steadying influence, I think, even though he's pretty raw at this level. I actually think he'll be all right. So I'm happy with that selection. But it's going to be up to everyone. Like, there's no one person they're going to have a set of tactics, and then everyone's going to have to do their bit.
Eddie Jones, your views on the selection of Liner ahead of Donaldson to start the game?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit about him. I remember I think I saw him in his first Super Rugby game, and I was really impressed by his maturity. Yeah, he's one of those young tens. He knows the game pretty well. He knows when to kick long. He knows when to kick high. He's not individually. He's not massively talented, but he's a very, very solid, good thinking player. He's got a good background, being educated in English rugby and that sort of game management type. It reminds me a lot of Finn Smith, the English 10, that they know the game pretty well. They might be young, but they know the game pretty well. And I think his job will be to keep turning the lines around, keep turning them around. And his ability to find space or to find a contest is going to be important. And that's why I reckon they've picked Potter, because Potter's he should be playing Aussie rules, mate. He's good in the air. And he's a good kid too, done it the tough way, couldn't make it in Australia. I think he played for Sydney Uni, went over to Leicester, chased high balls for 2 seasons. All he did was chase high balls, mate. And he was good at winning them. It's a real credit to him. He's come back to the force again, fought hard. It shows you, if you haven't got a lot of talent, the effort and the application, you can still make it to the top. So he's a real success story, I reckon.
So in terms, this is a question to both of you, building belief into the team. Obviously, the Lions have had their way with the Australian teams up to date. This week there's been a little disruption. If you listen to Joe Schmidt, he talks about, that Skelton and Valentini, not quite there. If it was the third test that they'd be in. A little disruption, obviously, in who's in and who's out. Gleeson the same. How do you manage that period leading into a game like this to build the belief and the confidence when there are those selection disruptions going on? Ewan, I'll throw that to you first.
Well, I think you have to have a really solid plan. And I don't know that for me whether the plan would need to change much with those players out, because I would have been, if I say tempo, then I'm looking. You've got to select according to the game plan that you want to play. So maybe some of those players are outstanding players, and you want them in the team. But the whole selection side of it has to dovetail into what you're doing in terms of the strategy. So they'll have a strategy. They will have known the situation medically already. So the game plan and the selection would have been known probably last week. So they would have been working towards that. So they've had time to be able to put that together. And they've just got to make the players believe that's going to be the way to do it. Unfortunately, for the Wallabies, none of the team, Brumbies for the first half, but none of the teams really did anything different in the lead-up games. They also just played Waratahs a little bit, but even they just played the same way. They just tried to play the same way back at the Lions, and the Lions, in the end, they had more quality. They had quality coming off the bench, and they'll bring their bench players on with 30 to go, and the scoreline just builds. And so there's no real surprises there. The Wallabies haven't been able to been helped tactically by the earlier games, except maybe the breakdown with the Brumbies. So they've got to work it out for themselves. But they've got some high quality players there, and they've got some interesting players. Bell coming off the bench. He's a handful. Pollard's a good player. Tom Robertson coming back in is a surprise. He's been a journeyman, but he's been solid. He was a good player. Tizano, I think, is one of the most improved this year. Because he's developed his attacking game a little bit better, carrying the ball. So you got McDermott, who's he'll tap and go and do stuff. So there's a bit to come off the bench. Callaway's a good player. So there's a bit there to come in to match the Lions, but the Lions, I don't know. I'd be interested in Eddie's thoughts on the Lions selection. There's some players there I think they've picked on pass form rather than touring form. I mentioned Jack Morgan before. I think that Chesham has played well for me in the games where he's been playing at 6. He's played well. So Byrne, they've got Byrne there in the side, but Chesham, I think he's been a really good player. I've been quite impressed with him. I don't know much about him, whether he's more of a second rower or whatever, but he's done a good job in the 6 jersey. So I'm just wondering if, and that goes back to what I said before, you start picking on past form, what they did 4 years ago on a Lions tour versus what they did 2 weeks ago. That's where it'll can get fractious when people, think that they should be in there and they're not. I mean, Morgan got man of the match, but he's not even in the 23, So I'll be interested in Eddie's thoughts on that because he knows those players better than me.
Eddie Jones?
I think particularly Chesham, mate. I think, he's a really dynamic, aggressive forward.
Yeah.
I think the aggression stakes is going to raise in this game. The games so far have been pretty tame events. We haven't seen any, really getting stuck into each other. And we know there's no violence in the game now, but just the physically challenging. And I think, that's one thing that Chesham would really bring to the table. I think with Conan and Byrne in the back row, they lose a bit of that abrasiveness. Conan's a big ball carrier, but he's not a really abrasive player. And Byrne's good over the ball, but not as abrasive as Chesham, so they might miss out a little bit. And Morgan has been good, mate, really strong over the ball. Probably suits, again, what Link said, Ben O'Keefe's refereeing. So maybe they've missed a bit of a beat there.
Looking at the Lions, Andy Farrell says that he has a plan, and that's the team that he's picked. Ewen McKenzie, what are we going to see from the Lions?
I mean, they've got some good. I mean, McCarthy's played well. The front rowers, they've had good performances by all the front. You're going to see more of the same. I mean, Finn Russell, he's going to play the game how he plays the game, and he's quite good at organising whatever. Eddie's made the point that if you can get pressure on him, he'll feel the obligation to try and win the game himself. So there's a real opportunity in that space. But you're going to see more of the same. They've got good players, and their ball transfer, and that's been pretty good. The question is whether, what defensive pattern Australia uses to try and disrupt that. But they'll just try and do more of the same. They'll win their set pieces, and then they'll have 13 guys stretched out across the field, unless we can do something with the breakdown, and maybe we've got that's the problem. They're going to have 13 players stretched out across the field, and they've all been defending pretty well. So the challenge is going to be for someone like Liner and others to maybe get the ball in behind. You've got the aerial skills of Suali. There's a few opportunities there that they could play to. But we'll see. I think it'll be more of the same.
How would you defend against this particular Lions team?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I think Eddie's already made the point. I think you've got to take a risk. So I think you've got to get in Russell's face and try and get him. The alignment, they've got a fairly, not intricate, it's intricate sort of play, but it all relies on the depth of play. So if you can change the depth of their attack, force it back a little bit, then all the running lines of the supporting players are all going to be different. So you've got to get in his face. So, someone like Gordon running straight at Russell, particularly early in the game, you can get him back a couple of metres. That's going to change the whole dynamics in the attack for a start. You're obviously going to compete in set piece and whatever, but I don't see Australia pushing them round at scrum time. You never know with the refereeing what they'll come up with at scrum time anyway, so it's a bit of a lottery. But, they'll have the requisite number of balls and whatever, so you're going to do all the orthodox things anyway, but I think they'll need to be take a few risks in defence.
And for you, Eddie?
I'd just add to that, I'd have Gordon really targeting the inside shoulder of Russell, like really putting pressure on him. And every time he passes, Russell's got to feel Gordon breathing down his neck. Like that's the pressure it's got to be. He's got to be calling his name out. He's got to be going at him. And the other thing I'd do, and there's a risk involved because Gibson's Park's good down the short side, I'd have the negative one on the ruck going at Gibson, just putting pressure because they've got to try to break the chain, break the order of the chain, and there are two areas you could do it. But there's risk involved in that, but I think Australia's got to take that risk.
So in terms then of, we've seen through the Lions matches so far in the tour, the impact of the bench and the quality of the bench and their ability to sustain effort and indeed go up a level. How do you maintain that? Now, if you look at the Australian bench, do you feel that there's enough on the Australian bench that's going to be able to match the quality and the intent of that transition period around that 55, 60-minute mark? Eddie Jones.
Well, I think one of the things that maybe they've got to do, and again, there's a risk involved in this, is go early with the bench. Like get them on, try to when that there's generally a mark around the 20, 25-minute mark in the second half, somewhere around that, where you see one team starting to tire, momentum's slightly shifting, and you've got to make a change there. Like on the weekend for Japan, we played Wales, and we were getting towed up, mate. We changed the whole front row at the 30-minute mark, and we got back into the game. Got back in the game on the back of that, and almost stole the game in the end. So I'd have that approach, go earlier, because you can only change momentum through personnel, generally speaking, and so I'd go early with the bench. Because Bell's a good young player, mate, and he can play 60 minutes. So you got no problems about his fitness. Robertson's, can get around the field. The hooker's a good athletic player. The back rower from the force can go all day. So you've got no risk about them running out of legs. So I tend to go a bit earlier.
What would you do, Ewan?
Yeah, I agree. It would be tragic to not see Bell out there for a significant amount of time. Robinson's good on the carry. Pollard's a good ball carrier. Hooper can mix it. He likes the physical side of the game. That'd be appropriate. As I said, Tizano's been really good this season. Like he was really good on the ball last year, but I think he's been a far more complete player. I've been really impressed with his development. Tate McDermott, you tell him out there and say tap and go. Unless it's a shot at goal, keep the game going, right? Get him out there and keep the momentum of the game going, or get the momentum of the game going. If it's been stop-start, get some tempo back into the game. And Callaway, he's a smart player, and Donaldson the same. So there's a bit coming off there, off the bench to add something, but I'd be trying to keep the tempo up. You've got to keep fatigue as part of the tactics. You've got to back that you're going to be a little bit fresher. These guys are coming off 12 months of footy, right? It's a long season for them. So you've got to make sure that they're tested physically. So you want to run them around, keep running them around.
Eddie?
And same, mate. Just they've got to go all out attack. But all out attack means that they've got to keep varying how they attack, keep changing it up. The Lions, again, they want a nice settled game, and Australia's got to do everything to take the structure out of the game they can. And to keep doing it for 80 minutes is a challenge. There's no doubt about that. But there's the opportunity there, and at Suncorp, 50,000 people, crowd's going to be going nuts. Probably good weather, is it?
Yeah. No, apparently it's beautiful weather.
Probably a bit warmer. So it's all set for an upset, and you just got to be thinking, right, we're going to take them out of their comfort area. We're going to put them in the Brisbane Sauna. Where, at halftime, you're going to see them come off the field. They got sweat pouring from them. There's some dead eyes. That's got to be the image that, they've got to set up. And that can happen. That can happen.
And at the same time, you're screaming at the referee, come on, let's get the next scrum going. Let's get it. Well, why are they standing away from the line? Let's get into the line. Let's get the game going, ref. Oh, we've got an obligation here to entertain the crowd. Why are we stopping all the time? It's not meant to be a drinks break. Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
Get some pressure on.
So, Eddie, you mentioned... Go on.
Sorry, Pam. The disappointing thing about that, I reckon, if Australia had a more inclusive approach, they could have used some of the provincial games to trial that in periods of time. Like, if I go back to 2001, which is, again, a long time ago, I know, but there was a collective work with the states and the Wallabies about how we're going to beat the Lions. And you haven't seen that this time. We saw, I think I mentioned it previously, and Ewan said, you saw a little bit with the Brumbies that they tried to play a bit different, but all the rest have been like they're happy just to play the game, which has been disappointing because you could trial this in periods of the game to see how it works.
So are there any other sort of contextual sort of issues that need to be considered by the teams ahead of the game? So we've spoken about the referee, a New Zealand referee, Will Reward at the breakdown. Obviously, he'll be very familiar with the Australian players and the way that they play, and they play with him quite regularly, and they've probably got quite a good relationship with him. We talk about the crowd. We talk about the weather. As coaches, are there any other things that you're looking at that are going to be important in terms of delivering, the performance with your team? Ewan?
Well, I think Eddie's current. I'm not, but the impact of yellow cards, the over-enthusiastic clean out or whatever it is, that's a massive impact on the game week in, week out. And I know everyone just accepts that, but that's, the discipline in that space is going to be really important because, teams get away. They get a try or two, and it's hard. It's not impossible to catch up, but it would be hard in this environment. So Australia's got to be super disciplined in that area and make sure that they don't give anything easy. So that's a consideration, and how you play out that period. If you've got a 10-minute yellow card period, how are you going to play that out?
And for you, Eddie, anything else that you'd be looking at?
Well, I think that's a great point. First 20 minutes, first test of lines, full crowd, everyone's going to be pumped. You just need your players to do the simple things well. Over enthusiastic hit or clean out or tackle, and you get a sin bin, and then you're behind in the gain line, which is going to be difficult. So I think that's a really important point. But I think the pre-work with the referee is going to be important. Like, I don't know what Wilson's like with captains, with the referee, sorry. But certainly Itaja will be working the referee, before the game. This is what we want, this is what we don't want, and he'll be very, very diligent about that. He's an intelligent young man. And I think, there's a bit of a captaincy challenge there between Wilson and Itaja of who can win the favour of the referee, because that's still an important part of the game. They still like to be like the referees, and who can engender a good relationship with the referee early.
Ewan?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's time well spent trying to make sure you can look at the referees statistically, how they perform, but in the end you've got to have some sort of relationship. And the coach can always be the bad guy, but the captain needs to be the good guy. So the captain needs to have that rapport. I've been impressed with Toja. He's been very good as a Lions captain, very measured, and he handles those moments on the field really well. And Wilson's been the same, but there's going to be a bit in that space. And as you go across the three tests, you've got completely different types of referees. So you're going to have to manage that across 3 games,
So just a final question then. Joe Schmidt, in his press conference in announcing the team, obviously, managing the situation, announcing his side. One of the comments that he made, which struck me, was, and it's a quote, he said, I hope that we can put a game together that can at least keep the British and Irish Lions pretty honest. That was his sort of tone. It was a bit downbeat. And to me, it didn't sort of send any sort of great confidence that he felt that his team were going to be able to pick it up. Do you think that was deliberate, or do you think he's a little bit downbeat about the team he's got to work with? So we can put a game together that can at least keep the British and Irish Lions pretty honest. If you're the opposing coach, Ewen McKenzie, and you hear the opposition coach say that, what do you think?
I probably wouldn't give it much credence, to be honest. I mean, when you're talking before the game, sometimes your job's to sell tickets and try and get people to turn up and watch. It just depends on the nature of the contest. So I think what he's saying to his players and what he's saying to the press will be two different things, So he's pretty measured. He's a pretty measured speaker at the best of times. So I don't think that I'd read anything into that. I think he'll be backing his guys. He'll have a plan, no question about that. He puts a lot of time and effort in. So, the question is whether the players have bought into it and whether they can execute it under pressure. And as we've described, there's a definite opportunity out there, but everyone's going to be at their best, to be able to get it done. And then once you can get 1-0 up, I think things that have fundamentally changed. Like this year, no one took shots at goal in Super Rugby, right? No one kicked at goal. So the scoreboard pressure was always different because everyone was just kicking for the corner, playing for the line-out drive. Even the Lions have done that the whole tour. When you get to this sort of game, you take shots at goal. Do you? Don't you? Then, you kick 3 points, then you're back at halfway, kick off. It changes where the game's played, So, that's the risk. Whether Australia's going to take their risk, whether the Lions are going to take their risk, or whether they're just going to take the 3 points. So for me, the game's changed a lot in the last 12 months. Everyone's looking for the line-out drive, try, and I'll be interested to see how each team plays that in the Test match.
And Eddie Jones, for you, a final word, perhaps.
I think going on what Link was saying about Joe Smith, I think, they'd be words just try to take the pressure off his team. I think Australians are always best when they're underdogs, like when they could chase something hard and the old dig in for your mates type situation. And I think, it creates a golden opportunity for Australia. No pressure, no one expects you to win. No one thinks you can win. Lions are talking about 3-0. Like, let's see what we can do. And the pressure goes off. And I think, if they adopt that sort of guerrilla warfare type attack where they're trying to put pressure on the opposition, that they build that belief they can put pressure on the opposition, then it gives them a great chance of winning, I reckon. Great chance of winning. But if it just becomes a status quo game, structured, simple game, the Lions will win and they'll probably win the series pretty easily. They mightn't win it 3-0, but they'll win the series easily because they'll just have too much consistency and power and orthodoxy about their play.
Yeah. All right. So tomorrow, give us your views. What do you think the result will be for the first test between the British and Irish Lions versus the Wallabies at Suncorp? Ewen McKenzie.
Well, can you tell me how many yellow cards are going to be? Because that makes a big difference. But I'm going to back Australia. I think it'll be really hard work, and I'm just hoping that they're all up for it in terms of we'll need their best games, and I think Australia can get there. But it won't be by much. I think Australia can get there if they can play it a bit differently. Hopefully they will.
And just a final question to you then. Just how important is that first test in a 3-test series? How important is it for Australia that they jag Saturday?
In 2001, I was in the coach's box, assistant coach to Rob McQueen. Eddie was the heir apparent. He was in the coach's box as well. And there were other people in there as well. And obviously we lost the first test in Brisbane. It was that we lost the first test, but in 7 days we turned around. We won the next two. So a lot can happen in 7 days, but you have to get it right. We had to change our tactical approach. We made a few mistakes in that game, and they looked pretty dominant, but we turned that around, and then other things, there's lots of things that come into play. So I think it'll be a game, and it's an important game. It's certainly nice. You want to win every test you play. You don't sit there and go, I can afford to drop a test. You never think that. So hopefully Australia will get off on a good note, and that'll really drive the fan base for the next two tests too, and make it really a real cauldron, at the big venues where people are there cheering. That's what Australian rugby needs.
Yeah, very definitely. And Eddie Jones, for you, who wins? Wallabies or Lions?
Well, I think it's all set up for a good Australian performance. If you think about it, the Lions have had almost perfect preparation games. Nothing's gone wrong for them. They've been able to develop their game, and it looks all nice and ordered. But we know Test match rugby, it's about the occasion. It's about certain moments in the game. And I think if Australia can really see some of those moments, and it'll take, a liner stepping up or a Potter stepping up to make a big play, then Australia can win the game. And if they can win this game, it sets a whole train of different sort of issues in place. Then the Lions will have cohesion problems, and then it gives them a real chance to win the series. If the Lions win the first test, I think it's going to be hard going for Australia.
Mm. All right. Well, listen,
let's text me after 20 minutes. I'll let you know.
Well, listen, we might draw a line underneath that preview, and it was promised as the ultimate preview, and yeah, I think it's delivered. It's certainly being able to bring Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie back together. You can understand why that combination has worked so well over so many years for Randwick, for the Brumbies, for the Wallabies, and obviously the conversations they've had, the knowledge that they've shared, they understand the game. And absolutely tremendous. But that's not the only rugby on over the weekend. And obviously the mission of Rugby Unity is to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. So over the weekend, New Zealand takes on France, Samoa, Scotland, South Africa, Georgia, Argentina, Uruguay, USA versus England, Canada, Spain, and indeed the Rugby Africa Cup continues in Africa for that slot that the winner goes through to 2027. Zimbabwe, Morocco, Algeria, Ivory Coast, Namibia, Senegal, Kenya and Uganda. So we will update you on those results. The final of the Rugby Africa Cup is next week, so lots to look forward to there. And indeed, actually to both of you, I know, Eddie, you've seen a bit of the under-20s that's been in northern Italy. Ewan, have you had the opportunity to catch up with any of the under-20s? Because over the weekend we see South Africa take on New Zealand in Rovigo for the final.
I will have a look at that. I've watched bits and pieces, and the under-20s, it seems to change a lot every year, but the players certainly come through from that tournament. You see them appearing in the test teams very soon after, so it's obviously a very valuable tool. Australia's been competitive in recent years, not so much this time, but it's an important tool. But I haven't watched. No, I watch highlights here and there, but I will watch the final.
Yeah. And Eddie, for you, what about that? The under-20s. It's obviously an important competition to continue to develop the players.
Yeah, well, what you're seeing is physically developed players at the age of 20. Like the physical development of the players has gone through the roof. What hasn't caught up in rugby is still the skill development, and I reckon that'll start to come in the next 10 years. So, I don't think we've got massively better skilled players than we had in the last 20 years, but I think that'll start to happen because of physical development. You look at that South African team, they could play Test rugby now. They're big enough to play Test rugby now.
No, they've been outstanding. Their halfback, Hassiam Pede, you can't take your eyes off him. Watching the game, he's just absolutely electric. But I've really enjoyed watching a number of those games, and well done to World Rugby for broadcasting them as much as possible. And indeed, live on Rugby Pass TV over the weekend, the match between USA and England can be viewed as well. So lots of rugby to get stuck into over the weekend. There's also the women's games. Brazil takes on the Netherlands, USA, Fiji, and the Pool C opponents in the upcoming World Cup, Japan versus Spain. That is going to be played over the weekend as well. So when we catch up for our review on Monday, we will be able to go through some of those results as well. So, so much to look forward to. Just a reminder that Rugby Unity is on Substack. So if you're looking for a guide, and to celebrate Substack, we have a city guide for you for Brisbane for this weekend, but then also for Melbourne and for Sydney. So if you just jump onto Substack, search up Rugby Unity, you can download those guides for free. I've got an editorial on there. There's some other content as well. So certainly jumping onto Substack and for Rugby Unity to download those guides. I think there's guides to all sorts of things, which restaurants, which coffee shops, the races, clubs, pubs, whatever. It's all there. Walks, everything that you can do in the city to enjoy. But let's hope that we do get that result this weekend. So listen, a big thank you to Ewen McKenzie, your debut on Rugby Unity. Very good, fine performance from you, a great return. Look forward to you coming on for the review of this weekend. We'll make sure, and a big apologies to you, we'll get you that microphone and headsets as well so we can hear you even more clearly. Although you did
important. I need to look the part. Yeah.
Yeah. And to you, Eddie Jones, what are you up to? Got a bit of a break there, mate?
Up in 5
Japan?
weeks we've got P&C, mate. 5 weeks to P&C, so started to get around this week and meet the players that haven't been selected to see if we can generate a stronger squad for the next tournament, mate. So, disappointing result on Saturday, but we had a bit of struggle to get up again for the game emotionally. Yeah. As I said, we stuck in there pretty well, but we've got a little bit of tweaking of our game to do, which is going to be important going forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's just so much to look forward to. And again, getting back to this point about how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, that tournament that you're talking about, can't wait to talk to you during that tournament so we can understand again about where rugby is in the USA, where are some of those challenges, where are some of the opportunities, and obviously the Women's Rugby World Cup that's coming up. We've got the Rugby Championship coming up. There's all sorts of rugby to look forward to. So we don't lack for content. I think we just lack a bit of connection, but we can continue to talk about that in the days and weeks and months ahead. So to everyone heading to Suncorp this week, be loud, be proud, wear gold. And really, let's turn it into an occasion. Let's amp it up. And certainly for the Lions fans as well, I hope you are there in good voice. It promises to be a great occasion. And let's hope that Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie are right, that Australian plays that up-tempo, exciting, transformational, challenging sort of game, which is going to knock the British and Irish Lions off their stride and secure a victory for Australia to ignite the series, because certainly that would be a great thing for rugby here in Australia. So again, a very big thanks to Ewen McKenzie. Also to Eddie Jones, a big thanks to you, the audience, for coming back once again. And thank you so much for so many of the comments that have been made. So from Harry Nelson, talking about the episode with Brett Robinson, really an insightful episode. Great to hear the plan for expanding rugby, which there were ways for Tier 2 teams to play more of Tier 1 teams. From John Long, the best games of these tours: Japan v Wales, Argentina v England, close games and well matched. And L. Brownie, union is a more intense. The suspension in a test match is incredible. And Hurricane 3058 says, love Eddie, always says how it is. So listen, please, keep the comments.
That might be Desi Tour vibe, mate.
Could be. But listen, we do want to hear from you, and we do in the weeks coming up. So if you have questions for Ewan, if you have questions for Eddie, please send them through to info@rugbyunity.com.au. And also on TikTok, YouTube. Please just send them through and we'll get those answers to you, because we do want to continue to put the emphasis on the third voice so as that we can get those views back to World Rugby, so as that they can continue to consider as they work towards their strategic plan, which is going to be launched later in the year. So anyway, there we go. Actually, Link, just before I let you go, Brett Robinson, a former teammate of yours, you reflect now he is the chairman of World Rugby. Eddie's had his say about that. What's your views on Robbo's election to the top job?
Well, I'm not surprised. Robbo's been he's a student of the game. He's been interested in the mechanics of the game. He's held a lot of different jobs along the way that would give him knowledge and wisdom in that space. So I guess I don't understand necessarily the politics at that level, but he's been a high-performance director of Australian Rugby. He's done bits and pieces, so he's got good knowledge. So hopefully that's going to transform into something that's, in the end, it's about improving the game as a whole. It's not about Australia. So you just need to make sure that you make a difference when you're in those roles.
Yeah, he certainly will. All right. So listen, thanks, boys. Enjoy the football over the weekend. We will speak to you again on Monday for the review. But listen, audience, thank you for coming back once again. Absolutely delighted that you are here. But until Monday, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.